So I've been reading Jason Schreier's new book, Play Nice, about the rise, fall, and future of Blizzard and how they came up as a ragtag group of friends to become one of the most influential game development outfits in history, and how the business side of things changed the way they operated and what led to their fall from grace in the eyes of fans. Now, there's a lot of lessons that you can extrapolate from this book, but the general sense that I felt in the first half was kind of inspiring, like reading stories about them taking their time to craft some of the most incredible franchises in history was amazing, and it was truly a wonderful read. The second half of the book details the merger with Activision and how guys like Bobby Kotick and other execs at Activision push to, quote, extract as much value out of their IPs as humanly possible, pushing the developers to release World of Warcraft expansions every year under the guise of serving players at the detriment of the developers' well-being, with things like massive crunch and lack of time to really innovate and do anything creatively. Wondering why things like BlizzCon exist when they don't make money, wondering why they have teams working on other games when their main moneymaker is World of Warcraft and everybody should just be on World of Warcraft. And as a longtime fan of WoW, it actually confirms everything that I felt I knew about the IP and how they're putting profit over everything else. It's something we all knew, but reading about it and actually hearing about conversations happening in boardrooms from people who were in those boardrooms is fucking insane to me. The latest expansion was awesome, but like in previous years, I felt that I played through the campaign main story and then everything else just kind of falls apart for me because it feels like it's formulaic, assembly line feeling for everything just for the sake of content. What made Blizzard so great in the 90s and the early 2000s isn't what they believe in now. And the thing is as I'm reading this book, I'm sitting here thinking you can take this mentality and throw it at almost every single AAA developer in the business, your EAs, your Ubisofts, your Microsofts, your Sonys. And what I struggle with is feeling like none of this stuff matters. The discussions that we've had here over the years about Ubisoft and their downfall and their missteps and trying to make it known that this is what gamers want and you got to stop focusing on profit, the shit doesn't matter. Check this out. An article from Games Industry Biz was released discussing the Ubisoft 24-25 half-year results. This just came out the other day, and how Ubisoft has been underperforming. And in it, Ubisoft revealed that they lowered their headcount by over 2,000 employees over the past 12 to 24 months, which is a lot when it comes to one company. Until you realize that it lowered their employee count to a mere 18,600 and change. 18,000 employees for a company that is putting out absolute garbage year after year. Seeing that number laid out in that article blew my fucking mind because how do we expect them to not focus on profit when they have a company like a machine? Maybe not so well oiled, but a machine nonetheless, running at that kind of bloated level. What I realize is that these companies actually just don't give a shit about anything but the bottom dollar. And it's one of those things we've talked about it for years, and there's this hope that maybe something will change and maybe Ubisoft will learn their lesson and maybe things will shift. And seeing those kind of numbers and reading this book and seeing the conversations that are happening behind closed doors, these companies truly, genuinely do not give a single fuck about anything that goes on in this comment section, in this video, online, on forums. They do not care. And I'm sitting here reading things about what people were saying about Bobby Kotick in the early days of Activision and how they basically took this yearly format with things like Call of Duty. And I'm sitting here and I'm conflicted because I look around the landscape in terms of FPS, and this is where the big confliction lies for me is Call of Duty is dropping games every single year. Yes, they are formulaic. Yes, they are cookie cutter Call of Duty rinse and repeats. But when you look around and you look at the indie space, the AA space, AAA, everything in between, there's nobody touching a game like Call of Duty, which is where my confliction lies. It's Call of Duty is a very polished product, but it's simply because they churn them out year in and year out. And we're losing the idea of working on a video game franchise for years on end to put out a really creative, innovative polished product. You know, I've been sitting here wondering like where the innovation is in the industry. And the truth is, like, that's over. If you're around my age going into your mid 30s, you know that like we grew up in a time where people were making games. They were on the cusp of something that I don't actually think they even realized they were involved in at the time. But we watched them make these games because they truly cared about the art, they truly cared about the fans, and they truly cared about making innovative products that people could enjoy. And nowadays, it's all about the bottom line. It's all about the dollars. It's all about profit over absolutely everything else. Because once these companies go public, they have to continually make steady increases in revenue quarter after quarter, year after year. And if you don't do that, you're fucked. There was one part in Play Nice where Bobby Kotick was pissed off that Blizzard's revenues weren't as predictable as something like Call of Duty's or Activision's, where one year they would make $700 and something million, the next year they would make $5. Then the next year they would make $800 million. And then the next year they would make $6. And so you would go up, it would go down, it would go up and go down. And they were mad about it, as if making hundreds of millions of dollars is a bad fucking thing. And it blew my mind that they sent people down to Irvine to like actually go in and investigate what's going on when a company made $600 million in a year, but it wasn't as much as last year's. And I know this happens everywhere. I know the book is talking about Blizzard, but I know this is happening everywhere. And like, I realize now, man, we're fucked. I don't really talk about this or bring this up at all on this channel because we mainly focus on FPS here, but I'm a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm a huge fan of Magic the Gathering. And both of those IPs have been threatened by these corporate overlords in the past. And there's one thing that I'm very proud of when it comes to at least the Dungeons and Dragons community. They fought back against Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast doing things that were just inherently against the community's wishes and very anti-consumer when it came to locking down community created content. And the crazy thing is Dungeons and Dragons is built off of user generated and created content, worlds, characters, items, all homebrew. Like, that is the basis of Dungeons and Dragons. And if Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast want to step on that, the people will just tell them to go fuck themselves, and they'll just do it themselves. Unlike what we're seeing with Magic the Gathering, where we're now seeing a bunch of like crossover stuff with a bunch of different IPs. A lot of people are pissed off about it. Magic the Gathering has been a money printer for their shareholders for years, decades now. But now we're watching that shift happen to where monetization is now over everything else. It's over the community wishes. It's over even the lore of Magic the Gathering. And instead of focusing on creating incredible, Magic sets, year in and year out, we're now seeing the introduction of things like Marvel, Spider-Man, and SpongeBob SquarePants literally be involved in Magic the Gathering formats. And it's just another one of those instances where the company is, instead of focusing on harnessing what the community really values, and that's magic and lore and setting and great sets, they're choosing to go for profits because they have the licensing deals, they collaborate with all of these other companies, and it's all just becoming one major advertising conglomerate. And the reason I bring this up is because it's not only happening in the gaming space, but this channel is a gaming-centric channel. And I had to share my thoughts on it because it's getting increasingly more and more difficult to look at the gaming industry and feel hope for the future, because these companies are incredibly bloated to the point where I feel like 18,000 employees at Ubisoft is completely unsustainable. But we also see that stuff in things like Blizzard and EA and Activision and Microsoft. These companies are so massive now because we were the ones that put them on the map in the early 90s and the 2000s. We bought the games when they were creative and innovative and new. And then those companies ballooned and ballooned and ballooned. And in the case of Blizzard, they weren't ready for the ballooning that a game like World of Warcraft gave them. They literally said they were printing more money than the US Treasury, which is insane. And so the problem is we grew up in the best time to be a gamer because we watched the innovation, the creativity, and the passion be put into the products, only to have those companies blow up so massively because of our love that they had to shift to be able to sustain the business and put profit over everything else. And you can see the trajectory through this book, and you can take what happened to Blizzard and you can apply it to almost every major gaming organization in this industry. And it's sad. It's sad that like there is no hope for the future of the AAA space. And it's one of those things like we have talked about it for years. You know, and then in reading the book, it really just kind of re-solidified my thoughts, because I've been slipping. I've been trying to find the positivity. I've been trying to find the future. Where are we going? How do we innovate in the space when expectations are that we need to innovate, we need to grow massive, we need to do bigger and better and bigger and better and bigger and better? But then we can't focus on profit, because once you start focusing on profit, that's when the creativity, it's an insane conundrum that we're in right now. And I don't really see a way out. And so my answer here would be like, well, let's focus on the indies. Let's shift and look over there. But realistically, outside of a few games that have already been out for years now, there's not a lot of fresh experiences and there's not a lot of things on the horizon. And although I do feel like supporting the indie space is the way forward, I think everybody just needs to come to grips with the fact that things are never going back to the way they used to be. And if you have a love and a passion for games like I do, you will be here through the good, through the great, and through the worst, trying to find fun moments that you can have either with yourself or with your friends, because that's all we really have left. I've been reading this book because it's been invoking a lot of emotion in me, not only as a YouTuber and somebody who has been literally preaching to the fucking choir with you guys for years on end, but also as somebody who is going through their own trials and tribulations with game development, working on our own project, and as a fan of games themselves. I'm watching myself look around at the world and realize that we are never going back. So the only way to move forward, in my opinion, is to find games that you can have a good time with, that don't cost a lot of money, that don't nickel and dime you every fucking chance they get. Being made and developed by passionate individuals who only have an interest in trying to recapture even a little bit of that magic that we had growing up, even though we all know at the bottom of our hearts, it will never be the same. It's been tough watching the industry shit itself the way that it has. It's been tough knowing that everything that we have been saying is 100% true when it comes to these corporate suits who really just don't give a shit about anything but profit, infecting and swarming to this industry because they saw the money coming in from passionate fans giving their money to passionate developers, and they wanted a piece of the pie. This video was mainly just a rant. I've been reading through this book, and it's been, like I said, it's been humbling, it's been inspiring, it's been depressing, it's been very, very sad at times watching a company that, like, I grew up watching Blizzard. Like, Blizzard was incredible. I grew up playing the early World of Warcraft days where it was fucking phenomenal. And much like everything else that we watched growing up at the time, every single time they just kind of fall from grace. And as somebody who is trying to balance finding fun times, being positive, while also trying to critique and call out shit, it's a very fine line to walk. But reading this book over the last few days has made me really, really sad, because a part of me wants to go back to the old days where things were different in all aspects of life. Not only just in video games, but dude, I felt like the movies were better back then. Music was better back then. Everything was better back then. But is that just me being old man yelling at clouds again? Because my parents felt the same way, and their parents felt the same way. And I think that's where like nostalgia kind of comes into play a little bit. Was it nostalgia? Reading through this book, there's a large part of my heart that says it wasn't. And so at the end of the day, if you're somebody who has either fallen out of games or you're just watching this industry implode with hatred in your heart, trust me, first off, I get it. But also, I think we should just relish in the fact that a lot of us grew up in the best time to play video games, in the best time to have experienced what it felt like to be at the cusp and at the brink of new technologies coming into play at the rapid pace that they did. I'm blessed that I was a part of it, and I'm glad that I got to experience it. I do wish that we could go back, but I also recognize now that we can't. I appreciate you guys watching, man. Shout out to every single one of you who have subscribed to the channel throughout the years and for allowing me to vent and discuss ideas like this and talk about the future, talk about the past, and just get my ideas out into the world. My name is Big Fry, and I'll see you on the next one.